Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Nine Sim. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you all are doing great. So I came across this video where this brother was talking about abolish whiteness and how white people can also come out to tell you that they are proud of their whiteness. And he is asking, what exactly are you proud of? Are you proud of what your ancestors did, the slavery and all that? And then this one was saying white kids deserve to know the whole history of the United States. I am so much in support of this because majority of them do not know jack about the history. And when black people talk about history, you see them jump into the comment section to talk about that. Like, how do you say something you know nothing about? And because they do not know anything, one thing I know is I understood about American history is that it's whitewashed, like especially when it comes to school. Because I have seen so many people coming here to say that why is it that they never learn about all this in school? That the ones they learn were the ones, I mean, like they learn history from TikTok, from black content creators. So what have they been doing in school? And majority of them are not even ready to sit down and Google or talk about it, think about it, and the rest of it. But there is also something I noticed about them. They are never ever ready to talk about history. I have friends. They are always very uncomfortable. And I keep asking, why are you very uncomfortable to talk about the history? Let's get into this.
I really wish they would stop hiding history from white kids more than they actually tell white kids that they're better than their history. Because they keep trying to sanitize the history of the United States. And it doesn't make any sense because there's so many plot holes. You're just going to leave this generation of white children confused. And then they ask that real silly question like, what are they supposed to look at and be proud of if we tell the history like it is? And honestly, I think they're looking at it the wrong way because what I want them to do is to be able to see a Klansman and not see themselves in the Klansman. Some of these folks actually ate people. As a matter of fact, they hung people from trees and then they had a picnic afterward. For example, say your grandfather was abusive towards your grandmother. I don't care how many businesses is in his name. I don't care how many buildings is named after him. Fuck him. He hit granny. And that should be the long and short of history in the United States. White people need to be able to look at history, not relate to them, and be able to say, we are better and we're going to continue to do better. As a matter of fact, we're going to revisit the systems that were set up by this standard and we're going to correct it as we go along because this was not right. The George Washington that was in Hamilton is not the same George Washington that owned Mount Vernon in real life. And they try so desperately to blot out names like Malcolm X and certain events that happened, but why don't they ever talk about John Brown? He was a white abolitionist along with Garrett Smith. He was an abolitionist who used one of his estates, I believe, as one of the stations for the Underground Railroad. There are plenty of white, non-racist, non-bigoted, historical figures that they could talk about, but they want to spend their time sanitizing the hypocrites. Stop trying to sanitize lynch mobs and slave masters. Let's teach history correctly.
During his lifetime, historian Noel Ignatieff was called one of the 10 most dangerous minds in America. And the reason why he was seen as so dangerous was for his call to abolish the white race. So what did he mean when he said we needed to end whiteness? To start to answer this question, we first have to understand what race and whiteness really is. In 2001, scientists made a revolutionary discovery. During the work of the Human Genome Project to map all of the genes in the human genome, researchers found that race is not real. In other words, racial categories like white and black are not biological or genetic facts, but social constructs. Science has shown that there is no gene common to all white or black people. In fact, there is far more genetic variation within racial groups than between racial groups. This scientific discovery supported what many people have always known, that racial categories were invented by human beings for political and social purposes and have absolutely no basis in biology. Science tells us that race is not real and skin color is simply an evolutionary adaptation. We know that modern humans evolved in Africa around 300,000 years ago, and all humans were originally dark-skinned. White skin didn't appear until much later, around 12,000 to 7,000 years ago. And the white race is an even more recent development in human history. In fact, the idea of white and black racial categories is only a few hundred years old. Historian Nell Irvin Painter argues that there was no notion of race in the ancient world. And scholars like Ibram Kendi argue that race is a product of the 15th century and is directly tied to slavery. Before the Atlantic slave trade, there were no white people. There were the British, the French, the Portuguese, Protestants, and Catholics. Before the Atlantic slave trade, there were no black people either. Instead, there were thousands of unique African kingdoms, cultures, civilizations, and religions. It was the Atlantic slave trade that created white and black people. When Europeans began enslaving Africans, they suddenly became one entity, white. And the people they enslaved became one monolithic group too, black. Whiteness meant the freedom to enslave. Blackness was the mark of the slave. By 1751, we can hear Benjamin Franklin discussing this newly created white race. He wrote, "The English make the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. I could wish their numbers were increased, and while we are making this side of our globe reflect a brighter light, why should we darken its people? Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity by excluding all blacks of increasing the lovely white?" From this essay, we can see that the idea of a white race was only ever defined and discussed in the context of being separate and superior to black people. Whiteness could not exist outside of the context of slavery. That's why you could argue that it's a bit ridiculous to say things like, "I'm proud to be white," or ask, "Why don't we have a White History Month?" Because there is nothing to be proud of or celebrate when it comes to the invention of whiteness. The idea of a white race was invented for only one purpose, to argue that white people are superior to black people and therefore have a right to enslave them. Now, white people can be proud of many things. You can be proud of your family background, your country, your achievements, your morals, your roots. For example, I'm proud of my Irish and Native American heritage. I'm proud of my PhD and my role as a college professor and my political convictions. I'm proud to be a brother, a son, and an uncle. But to simply be proud of whiteness is to be proud of a history of slavery, racism, violence, and evil. To acknowledge these facts has nothing to do with white guilt or white shame. It's simply a recognition of the historical fact that whiteness was invented to justify the exploitation and abuse of people with darker skin. It's a recognition that the idea of whiteness has done more harm than any other idea in human history. On the other hand, black pride is something beautiful, powerful, and necessary. Because whereas whiteness was invented to justify the right to enslave and exploit black people, blackness came to represent the power to resist that abuse and find strength in suffering and adversity. Blackness was about fighting back against racism and discrimination and finding power in unity and solidarity. That's why we can smile when we hear James Brown sing, "Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud." But we should all recoil in horror if we ever heard a white artist sing, "Say it loud, I'm white and I'm proud." As Brown sang in 1968, "Some people say we got a lot of malice, some people say it's a lot of nerve, but I say we won't quit moving until we get what we deserve." Black pride has always been about fighting for their dignity and human rights, which they were denied for centuries. White pride has always been about fighting to strip those rights away from black people and forever treat them as second-class citizens. This is why the historian and activist Noel Ignatieff dedicated his life to a powerful but controversial idea. He argued that if whiteness could be created, it could also be destroyed. And he believed that abolishing whiteness was the only way to ever achieve true racial or social justice in America. Noel Ignatieff was born in Philadelphia in 1940 to a working-class family. In 1958, at the age of 17, he joined the Communist Party and began a long career of Marxist activism. For 20 years, Ignatieff worked in factories where he sought to educate his fellow workers on revolutionary theory and help them organize to fight capitalism. It was during these years that he concluded the greatest ideological barrier to the achievement of proletarian class consciousness, solidarity, and political action is now and has been historically white chauvinism, which he defined as the ideological bulwark of the practice of white supremacy, the general oppression of blacks by whites. Ignatieff declared that for the American working class to unite and overthrow capitalism, white workers had to reject their whiteness and lose their white skin privileges that separate them from the rest of the working class. He argued that white workers had to break away from their white privilege and fight back against the ideology and institution of white supremacy, which provides the illusion of common interest between the exploited white masses and the white ruling class. In the 1980s, when factory jobs began to disappear across the country, Ignatieff decided to go back to school, and he was accepted into the Harvard graduate program, where he began work on his dissertation on the history of race in America. While at Harvard, Ignatieff started a magazine called Race Trader, and their motto was, "Treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity." He wrote that the aim of Race Trader is to abolish the white race, which is neither a biological nor a cultural formation, but a social construct, existing only because of the privileges its members enjoy within the state and the legacy of those privileges. When looking for a model of what it would look like to reject whiteness, Ignatieff turned to John Brown, who gave his life in the fight against slavery. In 1995, Ignatieff completed his dissertation, which was published as the book How the Irish Became White. He said he wanted to understand how the Catholic Irish, an oppressed race in Ireland, became part of an oppressing race in America. In the book, he shows how the Irish were not originally accepted into the white race by Americans. The way they became white was by joining in the white supremacist culture of supporting slavery and engaging in violence and discrimination against black people. Even though the book was an academic hit, he always had his critics. Some people interpreted his goal to abolish the white race as a call for violence and extermination, not realizing he was talking about the racist white mindset, not white people themselves. Ignatieff died in 2019 at the age of 78, but his ideas will always be relevant in a society still poisoned by white supremacy and racial discrimination. Years before the Human Genome Project definitively proved that race is not real, Ignatieff knew the greatest truth of all: the only race is the human. During his lifetime of activism and scholarship, many of his friends were pessimistic and believed that America would never change and always be corrupted by its original sin of slavery and its long history of racism. But whenever anyone would begin to despair, Ignatieff would tell them, "If we can just change 5 people's minds, we can change the world." I don't know if I'm that optimistic. I'll take just one.
There's a particular kind of confidence that white culture breeds, a certainty that we are right.
Something rather funny just happened. I was chilling at the top of the volcano behind me because that's what I do. And there was a group of about 5-6 people, 2 of which were white and everybody else seemed to be local and black. The dad, older and white, not from Guadeloupe, was the only one taking up space and talking. And he was talking in statements. He was clearly not very knowledgeable about Guadeloupe. And the people he was with were knowledgeable about Guadeloupe. And yet, he did not ask a single question this whole time. He was talking in statements. The rest of the group was spending their time either confirming or telling him that he was wrong about his statements. But at no point did he have the curiosity to ask the people with the knowledge who were with him to ask questions about the volcano, about the safety of the volcano, about the geography of the place, because clearly they were knowledgeable, because whenever he would make a statement that is wrong, they would stop and correct him. But he could have asked in the first place. At no point did he ask a single question to those people who clearly were more knowledgeable than he was. And that was such a good representation of patriarchy and white ontological expansiveness. We were at the highest point of the island, at the top of an active, living and breathing volcano, a place that should naturally command silence, meditation and awe, even to the most hardened skeptics of us. I was quiet. Most people were quiet because that's what the atmosphere commanded. But he was not. He was loud and he was taking up all of the space. He was filling the space with his statements, never questions. And he was half of the time wrong anyway. At what point the other white man, probably his son, half jokingly said, it's a shame the women are with us, otherwise we would have jumped the barriers and gone over to the forbidden area of the volcano. Everybody was like, well, no, this is forbidden and this is clearly dangerous. And he was like, well, yeah, but I saw a group of people going there. And that's the only time that I intervened in the conversation. But I was like, yes, but those groups, they were with professional guys and they were wearing gas masks, which you're clearly not equipped for. But it's this assumption that, there's a rule, but that's not for us because we're better than everyone else and we're also better than nature. We don't need to follow the rules. It doesn't matter if it's an active volcano because it's us. Surely we're safe, right? That is so typical of patriarchy, maleness, and whiteness. It's the combination of both. When you have been socialized to never have to ask questions, because even if you get it wrong, there are no social consequences for you, you never learn to ask questions. You never learn to be curious. You talk in statements. And this is a function of whiteness and of maleness as well.
This is all I got from this video, and I am going to ask, why is it that they have refused to teach them the proper history? Why is it that they are scared of learning history? Why is it that all of a sudden history it's kind of violent, Because I feel like there is need for the white kids, most especially, to know the whole history of the United States, to know exactly what they have done, their ancestors have done, and the things they have not done, to know exactly how to act. Because one thing I have learned to understand venturing into history is that when you do not know history, you are definitely going to repeat it. And the worst thing that will happen to somebody is repeating history. That thing is so. And I am so happy that I am so happy that I am in tune with history, because Black history is more like worldwide history. It's American history. And when you start hiding the history from people, there is something you are preventing them from knowing. That is, it's most really be something that is not good, right? Because I remember saying on this channel about a white woman, I think she's Russian, who actually talked about how she was taught, how they taught her history on slavery. That there was nothing really serious happened. It was just them finding out that what was going on wasn't good, and everybody lived happily ever after. I wish it's that easy to. I really wish the way they said it is what it was, the way it happened. But for how long will they continue to hide the history from people? And for how long will they continue to turn history upside down? Because another one is hiding the history and trying to turn the history upside down. The way he talked about abolish whiteness, he said that from how did they come about this race? Because all of a sudden there was a race, and then that was just to differentiate this person from this person from this person to the other person. And I keep saying it, Black people did not do it. So if there is anybody that will still dismantle all this and steal them, because people that look like me and other people also did not know it, not until everybody found out that there is different. I can see your skin color and know that this is where you're from. I can see this person and know that this is where you're from. And then in the end, you all know what that period they try to tell you that why is it that we can't say that we are proud of who we are? What are you proud of? Because I didn't see. Now, another one is also because anybody that will say that they are proud of their whiteness, he also doesn't know anything about history. I don't know if that does make sense, or the person is just trying to be problematic. I am going to draw the cut in here. I will see you all in my next video. Bye for now.